I work at a 24-hour diner off of a semi-busy highway. During the day, we get a lot of customers, but at night, it's a lot more slow and quiet. This night, I was working an overnight shift. There were maybe 3 customers quietly eating their meals. Around midnight, a man came in and sat at the counter. His name was Donnie, and he was a semi-regular, as he was a truck driver and would stop in whenever his job took him in the area. He was a young guy, maybe 25 years or so, and he was always very cheerful and made everyone laugh. He was also a very good tipper, so I was very happy to see him. Something felt off the moment that he walked into the door. His usually cheery demeanor seemed tense and stressed. He sat in the last booth and scooted into the corner, folding his hands on the table. I grabbed a menu and went to his table. I greeted him and handed him a menu, but he wouldn't even look at me. I asked if I could start him with a coffee, like usual, and he stiffly asked for a glass of water. I went behind the bar to get him his drink, wondering if he was okay. I figured maybe we had just caught him on a bad night, or maybe he had a fight with the wife he usually spoke about. I decided it was none of my business and brought the water back to his table. I asked if he wanted his usual, a cheeseburger, onion rings, and a slice of cherry pie. He shook his head and said the water would do for tonight. He stayed about another 2 hours, and I refilled his water maybe 4 times. Each time he finished a glass, he went to the bathroom to relieve himself and then sat back down in the booth, hands folded again, staring at the table. Eventually, he was the only customer in the restaurant, and since I had nothing better to do, I went to the kitchen to talk to my coworker and friend, Robin. Robin immediately started speculating, wondering if maybe he was going through a divorce. We thought up reasons why that might be. Maybe after being on the road for so long, his wife got lonely and stepped out. Maybe he found out that she's pregnant, and he wasn't ready for a kid. Our gossiping ended when we heard someone enter the restaurant. I went out front and saw that 2 cops had come inside and were headed to Donnie's booth. They spoke with him for a moment, and then Donnie stood up and left with them. One cop promptly put him in handcuffs as Robin and I watched silently. They escorted him out of the store, telling us to have a good night. We went to the window to watch the scene and saw another cop opening the door to the cab of his truck. Another officer came out with a camera, and 2 more came into our diner, one of them being my older brother Brandon. He and his partner came to the counter and requested some coffee to go. I asked Brandon what was going on with Donnie, and he told me that Donnie made a call about half an hour ago to the cops asking for help. He said he killed his driving partner, and his body was in the back of the cab. I was shocked. I never thought that man was capable of hurting anyone, but I guess you never really know your customers. Donnie told the operator that as soon as he got back into the cab at a rest stop, he caught his driving partner attempting to assault a young girl, maybe 17 or 18, in the back of the cab. Donnie beat his partner and gave the girl time to escape. His partner fought him, and Donnie ended up pulling his blade on him. While I was relieved to learn that he had acted to save a kid, I was sad that this would result in him going to prison. Fortunately, he had good lawyers and a sympathetic jury, because he was eventually acquitted in a manslaughter case. I've never met someone who killed before, at least not to my knowledge, and even though he did the right thing and saved that girl, I could tell he was horrified at what he had done. I'll never forget the look on his face when he walked into the diner. It makes me wonder about the things others have gone through before walking through those doors, and if I've ever served someone who's done much worse. This happened 3 months ago. I'm a busboy in my local diner, so mostly I just clean, but occasionally they have me bring out food when it's really busy. We were pretty busy this day, so I was doing a lot of running around. Usually when we're slow, one of the cooks, Todd, likes to talk to me. I don't like Todd. I think he's annoying and weird. He also doesn't always wash his hands when he leaves the bathroom, which is gross, considering he's the cook. Anytime I order something on my break, I have one of the other cooks make it, or I'll put it together myself if it's a sandwich or something. Anyway, I was wiping down a table when the man in the next booth began to stare at me. Once I noticed him and looked up, he motioned for me to come here. I walked over to his booth and asked if he needed anything. He was sitting alone and had a plate of fries and a BLT that had one bite taken out of it. He motioned for me to lean in, and I did so, slightly confused. He said, "Call the police," in a low voice. I gave him a confused look and asked if he could repeat what he had just said. I wanted to make sure I heard him clearly. He said it again, slower this time. "Call the police." I asked if everything was okay, and he shook his head. "Call the police and make sure nothing else comes out of that kitchen. This food is contaminated, and everyone here is at risk." I wasn't sure if this guy was a secret health inspector or what. He was being really vague, so I asked what was going on. He told me to pull the damn fire alarm and get everyone out of the diner, or he would do it himself, and to trust him. He was a regular, and I had never seen him this alarmed, so I nodded and headed to the back near the bathroom where the fire alarm was located. I made sure none of my coworkers could see, and I pulled the alarm. The light flashed, and the alarm blared immediately. I was a little surprised it worked so fast, because I don't think it's ever actually been used, but it cleared out the diner pretty quick. I pulled out my cell phone as I was walking outside and called the police. I told the operator that something was wrong at the diner and we needed some cops. I hung up and joined my coworkers outside, keeping my eye on the man who had told me to call in the first place. I was a little concerned that I would lose my job if this amounted to nothing, but I had a feeling the guy wouldn't ask us to call the police for no reason. Once they arrived, they came to the staff and asked who called. The fire department pulled up with them, and I started getting nervous. Just then, the man with the BLT walked over and said to the cops that he was the one who had called. He then promptly told the cops to check the MAYO in the kitchen, as he was positive that someone had put male body fluids into it. I was shocked. How would he even know that? He told the cops that the moment he took a bite of his sandwich, he knew, and that everyone who had eaten here was at risk. The police and the firefighters immediately went inside, and I saw Todd getting nervous. He was grabbing the sides of his pants and staring at the restaurant. Another cop, who had stayed with us, asked who was in charge of the food prep, and all three cooks raised their hands. He asked if they thought the other cops would find anything, and that's when Todd spoke up. He asked the officer if putting random stuff into people's food was a crime. The officer said yes, food tampering is a serious crime. Todd went silent for a moment, and one of our other cooks, Carlos, asked Todd what weird shit he was up to. "You got here before us this morning, and you're always late, and you were in the walk-in for a really long time," he said. "I don't know how long you were in there before I got in, but once I arrived, you were in there for at least 10 minutes before you came out." He turned to the officer. When I asked what he was doing in there for so long, he said he was checking the lettuce. "Todd, you bastard! What did you do?" The officer told Todd that if there was something he needed to tell him, to say it now, and that waiting could make things worse for him if he had something to say about what was going on. Our manager, Joey, looked pissed. "Joey, is usually first into the diner, but he was running late today because he had a doctor's appointment that ran late. "Todd, what the hell is going on?" he asked, getting in his face. The cop told Todd to just come clean, because if there was something to tell, they would eventually find out anyway. So this idiot proceeded to tell the cops that he put his male bodily fluids into the MAYO when he first got in. I was disgusted. He said he did it because he didn't think anyone would find out and that it would be a fun little joke only he knew about. The cop radioed to let the other cops know to pull all of the MAYO from the diner. Carlos and my other coworkers had to hold Joey back because he was ready to destroy Todd. Joey screamed at him that he was fired until his voice went hoarse, and Todd was immediately arrested. 2 of my other coworkers started throwing up right then in the parking lot. I don't like MAYO, so thankfully I was spared from his disgusting antics, but it made me wonder how long he had been doing this, and if he had done this with any of our other food. I started to feel sick as well. 1 tub of MAYO and a small container in the prep area tested positive. It's so gross to think about how many people ingested that MAYO on that day. If I already didn't like the stuff, that would have been the day I stopped eating it forever. Todd was charged with several felonies, as many people had eaten the contaminated mayonnaise. Joey installed cameras in the walk-in, in addition to every other area in the restaurant, excluding the bathrooms. Thank God for that customer sounding the alarm. Who knows how many other people would have eaten the stuff if he hadn't been there. This story will haunt me for a very long time. I, 21 male, work in a diner in my town. We have a coffee bar and I'm the barista. I really like my job. It's fun making delicious drinks for everyone, and my coworkers are all really cool and we get along great. One rainy day, I was standing behind the counter, drinking an espresso with condensed milk and chatting with my favorite waitress, Megan. We were talking about an anime that we had both just finished watching when a man came in with a boy who looked about 7 or 8 years old. They sat in a booth and Megan excused herself to help them. I sipped the last of my coffee, debating whether or not I should make another, when I took another look at the man sitting down. He looked a little familiar, but I chalked it up to him maybe being a regular that I had seen here before. But something was telling me that that wasn't right. The man was wearing a baseball cap, and he had the collar of his jacket pulled up. The boy looked nervous. I don't know how to describe it. He looked like a kid who had just gotten yelled at by his parents. Maybe his dad was a little hard on him in the car. I decided it wasn't my business and got back to work. Megan came back to the counter around 15 minutes later as she waited for their order to finish cooking. They were our only customers at that time, so we went back to chatting. We got caught up in our conversation and eventually a bell rang, letting us know their order was ready. But before Megan could grab the food, I looked up and saw that the man and the boy were no longer in the restaurant. Confused, I waited for Megan to come around with her tray and noticed it too. She sat the tray of chicken fingers and fries down and looked at me. She asked if they had gotten up to use the bathroom, and I shrugged. I didn't see them leave at all. Then we looked out the window, and I saw a silver car exiting the lot. Megan asked our manager Ben what to do with the food, and he told us that we could eat it if we wanted, so we both had early lunches that day. Later, as I'm scrolling on my phone on Twitter, I saw a post from a local journalist regarding a missing kid. The picture posted was of the man and the boy who were in our diner hours ago. Alarmed, I showed Megan, and she told me that I should tell someone. We showed our boss, and told him that they had come into the diner earlier. He told us to call the cops. The cops came less than 10 minutes later, and Ben let them review the footage from the security cameras. None of us caught the license plate on the car, but thankfully, the police already knew who he was. He was the father of the child and had taken him from his mother's house last night. The cops asked us a few more questions and then headed out. The next day when I got to work, I found out that the man had driven back to his ex-wife's house and unalived the kid and himself in the car in her driveway. This was upsetting, and I felt guilty that we hadn't alerted the police sooner. I wish I had known that boy was missing before they came in. Maybe we could have gotten the police in here in time. Ben told Megan and I that it wasn't our fault, and as he could see we were both feeling very guilty about what happened, he gave us the day off, and I went home and went back to sleep. I'm still sick over this. The poor kid didn't deserve to be caught up in whatever was going on with his parents. I hope his father is rotting in hell for what he did. I work at a diner in Montreal. It's not the best job in the world, but it definitely gives me lots of interesting stories. This one is pretty creepy, and my friends still don't believe that this actually happened. One night, a few weeks after I started working there, a woman came in by herself. She looked around 30 years old. She was holding one of those Stanley Cups girls have nowadays. Once seated at a table, she took the lid off of the cup and poured the contents on her head. She then took a yellow lighter out of her pocket and just sat there. The waitress closest to her ran behind the counter and whispered to me that that liquid smelled like gasoline. The woman turned to look at us and told us to get our boss, Mark. One of the waitresses went to the back to go get him, and the rest of us got the other customers to evacuate. Mark came out after a few more moments, and I learned that that woman covered in gasoline was his wife. Mark asked what she was doing, and her only response was, "I know, Mark." Mark looked terrified. Another waitress began to call the police. Mark's wife then proceeded to tell us that Mark had been cheating on her with her sister for the last year. Apparently, her sister finally came clean a few weeks ago. The woman asked Mark if he was ready to raise his children alone, and said that maybe since he clearly liked her sister more, that they could become a family after she's gone. Mark was in tears, begging his wife not to do what she came to do, but his wife was calm, and her mind was clearly made up. Mark continued to plead with her, and she listened with a blank expression on her face. She told him he was pathetic, a loser, a horrible man that she never should have married. Soon, the police arrived. I guess Mark's wife decided that she would rather have them deal with him, because it turned out that her sister was underage. She had recorded his confession with her phone, which was sitting in her bag on the floor. They both left with the cops, and that was the last day of work for Mark. He never came back, and neither did his wife. If you're still listening, I just want to say thank you so much. I really hope that you like the stories that I've presented to you on this channel so far, and please give me a like and a subscribe if you would like to hear more. I hope everyone has a great week.